Hi everyone, good evening. Thank you very much, Livio. Thank you very much to all the speakers today, and they came here. I'm really glad to be here. I learned a lot, and I'm glad to give my own contribution. I still see a lot of people. I still see a lot of young people. I'm especially happy about it because also, Professor Ceresa this morning he started the introduction talking about a lack of professionalities in the industry, or at least a lot of wannabe people. So you are the professionals of the future in some way. We are glad to be here with you as well. And I start to introduce me and to introduce what we do. I start to introduce a concept that is key, is very important for all the presentation, and I start to mention some of the professions that we mentioned this morning, like tea sommelier, tea master, expert, and so many others, and anarchist should be about me, but we cancel it because I cannot say I'm any of them. For sure I'm this one. Whoever of you knows it is Lao Wai. Since a long time I haven't heard some people call me like this, but I am a foreigner. It means that I do not belong. I'm something different, and it is true. It's true. In all my years spent in China, I've been a Lao Wai. I'm a Lao Wai into tea. Definitely, I am. The point of my speech starts from my personal issue as a foreigner, a person that comes from somewhere else and went to another place, and went to a place working with such a strong, with a product with such a strong identity that is also the identity of the terroir. And we mean terroir as geography, climate. Do not forget people, do not forget the history when we mention this word. And all around the concept of authenticity. This is something I hear so many times, talking about Yunnan, talking about Pu'er tea, talking about tea in general, talking about food in general, but especially about Pu'er. So we will do this, I will talk about three juxtapositions. The first one is minority and majority. So an ethnic minority and an ethnic majority. Farmers and dealers, they are two steps of the supply chain. They are very different. Each of them belongs to mostly to a minority or to a majority. And then we will close our speech, trying some outlook. Okay, introduction. China is huge, is Chinese continent, and we have 56 minorities. Is a huge amount of people, is a huge diversity that we can find. We are based in Yunnan. It's such a small province, and it has 25 minorities, especially where we work daily. That is a prefecture. It's called Sichuanbana area, and we have 15 minorities. There are pretty a lot. The environment in some way preserved the culture of each minority. There are really few roads now. They do not communicate with each other, not that easily. So the minority in some way, they are until nowadays pretty pure. I mean, they kept language, they kept many habits, they kept a culture. It's recognizable. Minority in Chinese is called Zhu. So for example, Han minority is Hani Zhu, or Dai minority is Dai Zhu. So we have 15, and it's curious because many people there, they add Yidali Zhu. Yidali, I mean, is Italian. They add me. So it's really a personal point of view, the one I have there. And again, it's very difficult for me to feel like a foreigner among so much diversity. And I lived many years in the east coast of China. There was much easier to feel like the only one the real Lao Wai. But in Yunnan, I haven't had that feeling, even if actually I was living and working with the local resources. Okay, so comparison between tea leaves and the big majority in China, that is the Han majority. To understand, just like 92% of Chinese people are Han, or they can be called Han. Of course, Han is a general concept that doesn't really explain. There are many differences inside that, but we're talking about anyway 1 billion point two people, so it's like 20% of the world population. In Banna, the biggest minority that is on a national level, of course, is a minority, is Dai. The Dai minority becomes a majority compared to the Hani one. The Hani is the most important minority in the area where we work, that is Banna and Nanuo Mountain especially, and is one of the two most important ones with the Pu'er production. I had few words about minorities so we understand each other, we understand the people we are talking about. So the Dai people, they were the kings in the Sichuan-Banna Valley. They were the rulers. They had control on the Mekong River Valley. So that makes them pretty powerful. And also, they were really proficient with agriculture. Until now, they are leaders in the cash crops, so like rubber and bananas. Until a few years ago, they were recognized also with Pu'er teas. They were also famous. The emperor in Beijing actually liked them, almost loved them, because they were very good in keeping the boundary peaceful, first of all, and in giving very good gift to the emperor, start from jewels, elephant, and exotical gift, and during history also Pu'er teas. So in some way, Dai people, more than tea producers, they were rulers and merchant. Then we have the Hani minority. They came from like Tibetan plateau about 1,200 years ago, but is debatable. They were warriors, but pretty peaceful. They became hunters and gatherers. They live with nature. They live in the mountain, and they are believed to be one of the first tribes to have domesticated the Assamika tea tree. They still have an animist relationship with the tree. They tend not to cut trees, and that's the reason why many other people, especially the Han majority, consider them lazy. For example, during the years of the industrialization, like the 80s and the 90s, where everyone was cutting old trees, gushu, ancient tea trees, to plant intensive plantations, they were keeping the forest, they were keeping the trees in a kind of lazy attitude. But in the modern times, they kept the value. So laziness paid off by far. Also, in terms of tea production, they are considered masters. Sometimes a Hani person can hire a Dai person, but they will always tell you that the Dai people, they just think about, for example, picking up the leaves. They just think about to pick up many, many leaves, like 1 gem and 5 leaves, or to cheat in some way, but they will never be able to take care of the final taste of the tea. So the two roles in terms of ethnicity are pretty distinguished. You can really see them in different styles of cultivation, different style of tea production, and different role in the supply chain. So we place the Hani minority at in the first part, in the mountain. So they can be farmers, landlords, and tea masters. Tea masters, for me, are, let's call them tea technical people. So they understand the plant, they understand the factory, they have the experience to know how to process the tea accordingly to the weather, accordingly to the season, accordingly to how much water with their bare hands they feel in the tea leaves. I know that tea master has different meanings, but this is the original one. Then when we go down from the mountain, so it means we go to the external world, we go farther away from the farmers. So we have the dealer, we have the blenders, and farther on we have importers. From my Italian point of view, I have to say, my Western point of view, or European, a dealer is seldom a good thing, because it's someone that puts some distance between the original land and me, that I'm the final customer. So it's someone that in some way sometimes steal the value from the producers. Actually, since when I started my travel, let's say my adventure in Yunnan, my consideration about dealers raised a lot, especially with the Chinese dealers, talking with them, meeting them, discussing tea with them. And for us, in our position as tea producers, we had to learn, and we have to learn a lot every day from them. And then as a third part, of course, we're institutions and schools, for example, like now, where we are. So let's keep the two most important, the two main actors. So the first one is farmers. That is much easier to imagine, at least from our European position. They are associated with the original figure, with the one that works close with the plant, close with the product, the one they have the technique, the proficiency, and they are the one, they are not nomads. They stay in one place, they stay in the mountain nearby their land. They are not known to travel, not anymore, at least. Opposite to farmers, or at least complementary to farmers, we have the dealers. The dealer has a double position, that is, they need to communicate with the farmer, they need to communicate with the final user, with the client. So they need a very broad knowledge. They invest in raw material. They need to know the raw material. They need to know where to find it, how to judge it, how was that material processed. They trade information, from my point of view, to build a relationship. It means being able to build a relationship with the farmer and with the market as well. They travel, they move a lot. They travel in Yunnan from one mountain to the other. They need a deep knowledge of different terroirs, and they need as well a knowledge of the final market. So they need to combine these two parts of their work, and those two parts are also the dealer identity with the farmer identity. So a dealer with a farmer, we always try to have, in Chinese is guanxi, that is a very important word whenever you deal with China at any level, and it means relationship. Relationship, because the dealer will always need reliability on the supply side, and at the same way, sometimes we'll invest in the farmer, and we'll also invest in the farmer's ability to satisfy the demand. So the dealer, during his travels, will bring from farmers to farmers the skills he has learned in different places. We have many international examples, like also Lawrence Zhang this morning talked about, Ceylon, and that was very clear. The way about a dealer may invest in the land, it works exactly in the same way at any level. The dealer is always an information dealer as well, and it brings skills. You can see that in many steps of the tea history in terms of exchange in terms of technical roles, and as we saw before, ethnicities. If we assume that a dealer is most of the time a Han majority or a Dai one, whereas a farmer is a Hani one. So think about the early history of Pu'er, that is also the legendary part of the Pu'er history, is what brings a kind of authenticity, at least a wannabe authenticity until nowadays. Think about the tea horse road, when the fermentation of the leaves literally happened, from what we can know, from what we assume, happened on the way. So we had these Pu'er cakes completely fermented, but just with the weather, that arrived in Lhasa, and in Lhasa they need to be unpacked, put them on the road, at least to save them from some mold. Absolutely, from a healthy point of view, they wouldn't be a good thing at all. In that part, the minority role during the production was the major contribution. The skills were pretty low and limited to a very basic production, without having a real contact with the final market. Later on in history, especially when the emperor started to buy Pu'er teas, then the skills absolutely had to improve. And that was a change brought by the East Coast. So we had many parts in the processing. And also we had a Pu'er tea that arrived to Beijing, to the capital city, that was pretty green, was not that dark as we imagined now. And also the aging part was still to be found and discovered. So here we had an increasing role of the merchant, of the dealers, an increasing role of the Han majority in the tea production and techniques. Think also about the contemporary of Pu'er tea, where I heard several times in Yunnan the old people saying, some people that they lived the 90s, and they said that in the 90s, very few people were still able to produce Pu'er tea as it was before the Cultural Revolution, before the Chinese Revolution in 1949, simply because most of them, they were dead already. The technique were lost. So there's been a recovery, a research for authenticity that started from Taiwanese immigrants and from Hong Kongese immigrants, with a lot of foreign influences. Still, the ethnic minority, the Hani minority, is still associated with something authentic, because it's a link to the past in some way. It's resident in a land, it didn't move from that land. So we tend to ignore the role of the dealer, the role of also of the demand, think about the market side. And we just stick a label that is a historical label, social, and also political label to the minority, whereas the final product is much more complex and is much more mixed in terms of identity. So I have to say that the environment changed a lot since when we started working in Yunnan. At the beginning, to cross the valley between Nannuo Mountain and Pasha Mountain, where we have our trees, took us 2 hours and a half. And about beginning, just 5 years ago. Now they built a road, just a very common countryside road, very small, a very easy road. And it takes us only 20 minutes. Before, we had in Nannuo a very preserved community of Hani people. In Pasha Mountain, a Ragu minority. And they were both very preserved. This small road, in just 5 years, really created a lot of divorces, mixed marriages, and is mixing them. Things are changing so fast. So what's the future? The influences are really many. Today we discussed a bit with other speakers about the cultural identity, about tea. Someone mentioned also the international influence that we had during history, and they're just going to increase in terms of content, in terms of habit, ceremonies, and of course we are making the authenticity of the product now with our discussions as much as we are making the culture, the tea culture in terms of the product, the terroir even if we are so far. So what's next is totally up to us. I have to say the new generation of minorities, from my point of view, that is personal, so from our position is not changing much. They are still resident, but many more travelers are going there. Like, I think some of you already traveled to China or are going to do that. So the world is really mixing up, and the tea is changing quickly. So we need the tools to understand the change. Okay, so for me, this one was just the start of the conversation. Also, it's the end of the day. So I invite every one of you to continue the conversation. You can find us any moment. You can find our contact here or later on during PPT. And I conclude here, and I thank you all for your attention. Thank you.